We often use the term narcissist to describe someone with an obsession with selfies or an inflated vanity. However, these cultural clichés miss the clinical reality of the disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is defined by a profound inability to regulate internal self-worth. To compensate for a fragile, empty core, the individual constructs a false self, a rigid, inflated image that must be constantly protected from reality. This false self requires constant maintenance through narcissistic supply. This is a continuous stream of attention, admiration, and control extracted from others to prevent the abuser's internal world from crumbling. The narcissist behaves like an alcoholic who is insatiable for this attention. They compulsively direct their entire life toward harvesting these bits of supply, using them to carry out basic mental functions. When observers see the resulting toxicity in a relationship, the reaction is often judgmental. If the treatment is so poor, why not just leave? This reaction ignores the neurobiological trap of the trauma bond. This connection is a psychological response to abuse that occurs when the victim forms an intense bond with the person mistreating them. Instead, the victim is held firmly in place by a scientifically verifiable and deeply ingrained loop of behavioral conditioning. The cycle begins with phase 1, idealization. The narcissist projects a perfect version of themselves to secure a new source of supply, overwhelming their target with excessive love and attention. This love bombing establishes a baseline of intense emotional highs, hooking the victim into the relationship before the abuser's personality shifts. Once the source of supply is secured, the abuser enters phase 2, devaluation. The artificial perfection disappears, replaced by criticism and scorn. To protect their fragile ego, the abuser relies on clinical defense mechanisms like projection and blame shifting. They accuse the partner of the very flaws and behaviors they themselves are exhibiting. This structural equation model from psychiatric research illustrates the path of the abuse. The arrows show how both grandiose and vulnerable narcissism flow through defense mechanisms to create psychological distress in the partner. Gaslighting is deployed during this phase to dismantle the victim's memory and perception. The abuser denies reality and insists the victim is overreacting or going crazy, a tactic linked to the manipulative traits of the dark tetrad. This systematic destruction of reality ensures the victim cannot trust their own judgment, leaving them without the psychological tools needed to defend against further mistreatment. The anchor of this phase is intermittent reinforcement. This is a schedule of reinforcement that provides rewards on a variable, unpredictable timeline. This graph illustrates how the abuser operates like a slot machine. Deep, prolonged valleys of abuse are punctuated by unpredictable breadcrumbs of love, keeping the victim stuck in a loop of trying to win back the good parts. This cycle rewires the brain's reward system. The victim works harder to trigger the next payout, even as the good times become increasingly rare. When the narcissist has fully drained the victim's supply, they move to phase 3, the discard. The abuser ruthlessly abandons the victim, showing zero empathy for the pain they cause. If the abuser needs to regain control later, they use hoovering, returning with false promises and apologies to suck the victim back into the cycle once more. This cycle is a calculated behavioral conditioning loop that makes the relationship highly resistant to extinction. The aftermath of this conditioning is a systematic erosion of identity. Many survivors emerge with symptoms of complex PTSD, including hypervigilance and intrusive memories of the abuse. This is often accompanied by chronic anxiety and self-blame, as the abuser's constant projections linger in the victim's mind. Clinical research emphasizes that the abuse is a reflection of the abuser's internal psychological deficits, rather than any inadequacy in the victim. Breaking the bond requires identifying these manipulative tactics, tracking behavioral patterns as raw data, and recognizing the trauma bond for what it is. Understanding the cold mechanics of this behavioral loop is the tool for dismantling the trap and reclaiming reality.